Australian as they come, that's Holden.
Holden, you in my Holden. Life is simply divine. All the world is fair. I'm a millionaire on the road ahead. There's a happy sign. Holden, you in my Holden. You were meant to be mine. We will have a wedding. No regretting, baby, ain't that fine? Now we can't expect all sunny weather. Troubles come, my dear, but as long as we're to travel together, we'll take them all in top gear. Holding you in my Holden.
Lion's Den, episode 47, Coyle's House, Anzac morning.
Good morning, Thelma.
Mother.
Here is your breakfast.
Thank you, Mother.
We will be travelling into the city to see Colin and Fred straight after breakfast.
City, Anzac Day march about to start.
All we have to do is find a spot ahead of the march and Colin and Fred will pass us. Then we can keep up with them right through to the end. I think Fred was with the first pioneers, so he should be somewhere near the front. The war is still going, so I imagine he'll be wearing Ernie's medals and marching somewhere in with the World War I returned servicemen. Or he could be marching with Fred. Or maybe with other members who returned home wounded from the Middle East. If we stay ahead of the march, Fred and he will pass us, and then we can all catch up. Well, here we are. I can't see Fred yet, or Colin.
The drums begin, and the bagpipes start playing as soon as the drum is on the full beat. The huge column of men move off, all in step, just as they did in 1914 and 1939. The marching tune is A Long Way to Tipperary. Colin is standing behind a fellow soldier who is in a wheelchair, one of many who were sent back on the same ship Colin was aboard in 1943.
Here we go. The only thing I don't like about marching here is the fact we are marching behind the light horse.
Why would that make any difference?
What makes the difference is we will have to try and dodge the inevitable, but still remain in step.
The inevitable?
Yes, what inevitably comes from the horse's rear, if you know what I mean.
Oh, shit.
Yes. Landmine.
Coyle's house, lunchtime.
What a wonderful day. Thelma, could you pop the kettle on, please?
Yes, Mother.
I'll just change and then put on a light lunch for us.
That will be lovely, Bobby. How did you go, Colin?
Not too bad, Uncle Fred. I found some of the blokes from the 6th Division. I picked one of them that was in a wheelchair and pushed him. There were quite a lot in wheelchairs.
Stands to reason. Most of the 6th were captured or wounded on Crete.
Quite. How was your march, Uncle Fred?
Fred looked very fine.
Yes, it was not too bad. I caught up with a couple of old pioneer lads and a couple of the blokes I met up with on Gallipoli. But I'm afraid my marching days might be coming to a halt in the next couple of years or so. I'm not as fit as I used to be.
Oh well, when you do feel too tired to march, I can push you in a wheelchair.
Oh my goodness, I hope it doesn't come to that. I'll just have to work on my fitness before next year.
I suppose that is another option.
Lunch is ready, everyone.
Thank you, Mother.
Thank you, Bobby.
Colin, could you switch on the radio, please?
Yes, Mother.
The news will be on.
Here is the news. Berlin, almost encircled. Russians now hold at least one-third of the city. Battle becoming vast. Mopping up operation. From our own correspondent in London and AAP, Red Army forces have nearly encircled Berlin and it seems that at least 1/3 of the city is now in Russian hands, says Reuters correspondent in a late dispatch. Million prisoners in 23 days, from our own correspondent in London. More than 1 million prisoners were taken during the first 23 days of... It was stated yesterday. The official count to April 22nd inclusive was 993,578. Link up possible anytime. From our own correspondent in London and AAP. It is clear that Russian and American forces in central Germany are now in a position to link up at any time they choose. Correspondents state, on Monday night, flares were seen on the east side of Elbe, which are thought to have been sent up by Russians. Allied pilots flying over the area saw Russian tanks, which were clearly recognized by prearranged identification signals. There is increasing evidence that when the link-up comes, it will be broad and solid. West and north of the link-up area, the US 1st and 9th Armies hold relatively quiet fronts along the River Elbe and the Mulde. In rear areas, large-scale mopping up continues, with thousands of Germans still at large. And now, to local news. Many 2nd AIF men in Anzac Parade. 40 bands to take part. Members of the 2nd AIF took their place in the annual Anzac Day March today in increased numbers. This brought a much larger crowd of spectators than usual to the city. With the 2nd AIF were men who served in the Middle East, Greece and New Guinea campaigns. They were led by Brigadier W. Cromwell and followed the veterans of the 1st AIF. The march was led off from the Swanston Street, Burke Street corner by Major General C.A. Clowes and proceeded to the shrine along Swanston Street and St. Kilda Road to Domain Road. Tobacco rations unchanged. Civilian tobacco rations for May will be the same as for this month. 70% of the average monthly purchases by retailers. That was the news. More news at 7 p.m.
I noticed a lot of children were participating in the memorial.
Yes. Well, there is a whole new generation of children now to remember their fathers and uncles.
Yes, Colin. Hopefully, it looks like the war will end soon.
Yes, Uncle Fred. It sure looks that way.
Coyle's House, tea time. 8th of May, 1945.
Tea is ready, Thelma. Colin.
Thank you, Mother.
Here is the news. Capitulation, Allied announcement from our own correspondent in London and the AAP. The Allies have officially announced that Germany has surrendered unconditionally, says Reuters correspondent at Reims, General Eisenhower's HQ. Admiral Donitz has ordered the unconditional surrender of all German fighting troops. This has been announced by Flensburg Radio Count Schwerin von Krosigk, German Foreign Minister, said the German High Command had accepted unconditional surrender effective as from 12 p.m. GMT, at 10 p.m. Monday Melbourne time. Speaking as leading minister of the Reich government, which Donitz had been appointed to deal with war tasks, von Krosigk said, I turn to, at this tragic moment in our history, the German nation. Germany, after a heroic fight of almost 6 years of incomparable hardness, have succumbed to the overwhelming power of the enemies. To continue the war would only mean senseless bloodshed and futile disintegration. The government, which has a feeling of responsibility for the future of the nation, was compelled to act on the collapse of all physical and material forces and to demand from the enemy a cessation of hostilities. Our sympathy first go out to our soldiers. No one must have any doubt about the heavy sacrifice which will be demanded of us in all spheres of life. We must take them upon us and stand loyal to our obligations. On the other hand, we must not despair. We must keep one thing in mind: unity. We shall need unity in the foundation of our people. We must acknowledge the supreme law of the right of inner conviction. Unconditional surrender to the Western Allies and Russian was signed at 2:51 a.m. yesterday, 12:51 p.m. Melbourne time, in Rheims schoolhouse, which is General Eisenhower's headquarters, says an Associated Press correspondent at Rheims. The surrender was signed for the Germans by Colonel General Gustav Jodl, the new German Chief of Staff, and by General Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bodell-Smith. General Ivan Soslovkov signed for Russia. General Francois Seves for France. German-controlled Prague Radio denied the unconditional surrender report by Flensburg Radio, as far as Russia was concerned, and said only the fight against the Western Allies had ceased. Admiral Donitz has issued a special order to U-boats to cease activity. It was addressed to my U-boat men. He said, "Continuation of the struggle is impossible from remaining bases. You have fought like lions. Crushing superiority has compressed us into a narrow space. You are unbroken in warlike courage and are laying down arms after an unequalled heroic fight." In London, there is a growing expectation that Mr. Churchill will broadcast to the nation in a matter of hours the great news that the war in Europe is over. The actual time of the victory announced is still uncertain. It may depend on telephone talks that have been going on between London, Washington and Moscow, as the announcement will be made from the three capitals at the same hour. Mr. Churchill presides at a meeting of the full cabinet at 10 Downing Street yesterday morning. There was an air of excitement in Whitehall as ministers came and went. Exchange Telegraph Agencies says Mr. Churchill will broadcast the announcement from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. That was the news. More news at 11 p.m.
Australian as they come, that's Holden.
Holden, you in my Holden. Life is simply divine. All the world is fair. I'm a millionaire. On the road ahead, there's a happy sign. Holden, you in my Holden. You were meant to be mine. We will have a wedding. No regretting. Baby, ain't that fine? Now we can't expect all sunny weather. Troubles come, my dear. But as long as we're to travel together, we'll take them all in top gear.